This video is now in session, and for the filibuster, what if Democrats actually remove the filibuster, and what if Joe Manchin as well as Kirsten Sinema go in support of the removal of the filibuster? Well, uh, it's a hit or miss for Democrats if they take away the filibuster. And the reason why is that, first of all, obviously there will be a hit because they can finally pass a lot of their big bills, like the infrastructure bill, the infrastructure plan that Joe Biden put out, the American Jobs Plan, that can actually pass with a 50-seat majority for Democrats instead of a 60-seat majority. The voting rights bill that Democrats put in, called For the People Act, that is able to pass the Senate now with 50 senators. Other bills like healthcare and as well as climate change, energy. These kinds of bills can finally start passing in the Senate floor with 50 Senate votes. Now, obviously, there will be a few progressive bills that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema would oppose, which would then block the bill from passing. But there would be bills passed for the Democrats. So wouldn't that be good for Dems? Not necessarily. And the reason why is we have to look back at past precedent to see what happens when a party has a stronghold in the Senate or in the House, and that goes back to 2009, which is around the time when the Affordable Care Act was passed both in the House and the Senate along party lines. Now, this bill today is widely regarded is pretty popular with Americans, but back then it was widely unpopular. A lot of people objected to it because of how confusing it was, and the Republicans took notice of this and campaigned against the Affordable Care Act in 2010. And as a result, because of this complicated bill and this unpopular bill, we saw Republicans take dozens of seats in the House and take a lot of seats in the Senate. So that is the miss part for Democrats. It's a hit or miss situation, and it could go either way for Democrats. It can allow them to get big bills passed, but at the same time, they have to be wary that of the fact that if they pass an unpopular bill, or if they pass a bill that does not have support and is not clear, then they will most likely lose both the Senate and the House in 2022. And they can't afford to lose both chambers of Congress so easily in the midterms. As of now, the Democrats have passed mainly popular bills, most notably the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, which was widely popular with Americans. That said, if they do something like the American Jobs Plan and the Republicans successfully go against it, let's just say, for example, the corporate tax rate, where the Republicans can argue that the tax rate increase would then the corporations would direct the burden over to their employees rather than to themselves, and as a result, the American Jobs Plan could then become unpopular. Other things like climate change, if Democrats go way too far and do something similar to the Green New Deal, which I doubt would happen with Joe Manchin, then it would not signal a good thing for Democrats in 2022, because while they're most likely going to lose the House, they actually have a very good chance of gaining seats in the Senate, just like how Republicans did so in the 2018 election, where they lost the House but gained seats in the Senate. The same thing could happen with Democrats if they actually passed bills correctly, and this is this is the power of Joe Manchin, and this is effectively how Joe Manchin does contribute to the Democratic Party in a positive way. He recognizes that he has constituents at home who are staunch Republicans, but at the same time, he also recognizes that the optics of Democrats passing certain bills through the Senate. He realizes that if bills that cost a lot of money without justifications are passed, then it becomes very unpopular with the American majority, and thus would lose seats for Democrats in the Senate in 2022. So So what happens then if Democrats don't pass the filibuster and nothing happens to the filibuster? No talking filibuster, no absolute removal of the filibuster. Well, it would be so-so for Democrats, just like removing the filibuster. The thing with keeping the filibuster is that the vote threshold is really high, 60 votes, which means that Republicans there needs to be 10 Republicans in support of a Democratic bill in order to get it passed. And there are only a few Republican senators that I believe could defect over to the Democratic side. That being Susan Collins of Maine, Mitt Romney of Utah, Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, in addition to potentially Pat Toomey, but in very rare instances. But these are the three senators that I could see defect over. Mitt Romney would also be a stretch. So as you can see, it's not really good for Democrats because that's only 2 of 10 seats. And the fact that I'm not able to figure out any other seats shows that it's going to be hard for Democrats to get stuff passed with the filibuster in place. And it means that they have to do a lot of bipartisanship with Republican senators. And taken from past precedent with Harry Reid's tenure at the Senate, it shows that he had to water down a lot of bills, which then eventually became ineffective, and a bill that Republicans could then campaign against. The Affordable Care Act was watered down from its original version because of Republicans, so as the Wall Street Reform Acts that Harry Reid passed while in the Obama administration. So it's not good for Democrats either, and we could see a situation just like 2016 where voters become incredibly frustrated with the Democratic Party about their lack of action, about the inaction that's happening in Congress, and that would put Democrats and Republicans in another Trump kind of situation where there's an outsider who then campaigns on who I wouldn't say radical, but on far reaching ideas, and then wins the presidential election, just like what happened with Donald Trump in 2016. So it's a situation that Democrats don't want to get into either. Actually, it is a situation that Democrats would be fine with because it would give them a better majority. That said, I'd say that wouldn't be the best option in terms of legislation for Democrats. Now, there are 2 other alternatives. The first is to pass a talking filibuster, and this is what Joe Manchin as well as Joe Manchin wanted. He wanted that, and Dick Durbin of Illinois supported that. So in the event of a talking filibuster, what that would mean is that instead of threatening to open debate, threaten to close debate on a bill. Instead, the Republicans would have to say that on the floor. They would have to make speeches about why a bill should not be passed and not end debate. So that is while it would not help with the legislative stalling by Democrats, what it would do is give Democrats some sound bites and political leverage in 2022. Imagine the idea, let's say, of like Pat Toomey going against a bill and making a speech on the floor against the bill. Even though he's not running in 2022, it's a soundbite that Democrats could use to help their candidates. Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Imagine him making a speech against a popular bill among Americans. That would be a great soundbite for Democrats, politically speaking. Same thing for Richard Burr and other senators, Rob Portman. Even though some of the senators are retiring, it's still a good soundbite for Democrats to use. And that's one option that Democrats could do to then give themselves more seats in the Senate, so that they don't have to have as much bipartisanship with Republicans. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. but they would no longer have to convince as many Republicans to join them in their bills. That's one alternative. The second alternative is to not remove the filibuster, but to lower the amount needed to surmount the filibuster. Currently, it's at 60 votes, 60 senators needed to end debate. But what the Democrats could do is lower that number to something similar to like 55, let's say. In the case of a 55 majority, then what that would do is that would require less senators for Democrats to attract. So they could get Lisa Murkowski and as well as Susan Collins in addition to 3 other Republicans. And they could lower that majority if they wanted to even more. They could lower it to 53, where they would just need 3 Republican senators, and they could just get 3 senators to go with them for bills, and that would pass the bills. Now, it wouldn't be a completely progressive movement that Bernie Sanders wants, but at the same time, it wouldn't be Joe Manchin's type of conservatism, conservative liberalism that he practices as the senator from a very Republican state. Now, when Republicans do get their majority in the Senate, which they eventually will, it also signals that it would take less seats for them less Democrats to convince in their bills. That said, for the Republicans' bills, they include stuff like tax breaks for corporations, and all Democratic senators oppose that no matter what. So it's certainly not a thing that would necessarily help Republicans in the future, or unless if they ascertain 55 seats in the Senate, which doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. But for Democrats, it will help them because there are moderate Republicans who are willing to negotiate with Democrats on certain bills. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins are definitely open to negotiations with Democrats on certain kinds of bills like infrastructure, and that would give them political leverage. Meanwhile, though, Joe Manchin would most likely not be in support of a corporate tax break, and thus would not be open to negotiations. So those are the choices for Democrats. They can either remove the filibuster, keep the filibuster, have a talk-in filibuster, or lower the majority needed for a filibuster. And that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.